everybody. How are you? Шановні друзі, слава Ісусу Христу, it's a holiday today, so that's why there are some people in the East Village, some people outside. This is actually the last time we're going to be celebrating this holiday on the old church calendar because they have announced that this entire community is going to be changing over to the Christmas on the 25th as of next year. So very auspicious week for us. You have gathered here several community leaders, some of which have been doing this for many, many years, longer than I have. We have, in our period here in the East Village, had numerous congressional representatives. I can't recall one who is coming in fresh out of politics and into Congress, as well as not coming in as a dormouse. We probably see you on every TV channel for years now, and especially since you came to Congress. So for our community, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of questions, but it's not for me to speak. It's definitely for Congressman Goldman. I sent all of you his webpage. We have some helpers of his as well, but let's get the community meeting started with a few words from Congressman Goldman.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you so much for having me. I am new to politics, but I'm certainly not new to Ukraine. And as you may know, I was the lead counsel on the impeachment investigation of Donald Trump, which of course included him withholding essential military assistance and extorting President Zelensky for his own personal benefit. And during that process, I got to know a lot about Ukraine, the history, the importance, the fight for democracy, the fight against corruption, and having now, unfortunately, watched what has transpired, the fortitude and the strength that President Zelensky showed in standing up to Donald Trump several years ago should have foreshadowed for us how also a new politician like him really was going to be such a tremendous leader and what the world now sees as a heroic figure in our fight for democracy, our fight against authoritarianism, our fight for what we in America call a rules-based order, which is what we've had since World War II. I am, as a result of that experience, and I've gotten to know several of the sort of prominent Ukrainian voices. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is a supporter of mine, a friend of mine, and his brother Eugenia, and I've spoken at length with them about the conflict, about what Ukraine needs, and they're a great resource for me as I dive into Washington and figure out ways to support both the Ukrainian community here. I'm sure many of you have relatives there who are in the middle of the struggle, but also supporting President Zelensky and Ukraine in this existential fight for democracy. And I really view this personally as someone who ran for Congress because I'm concerned about our democracy at home. I view this Russian aggression to be a similar existential challenge for democracy around the world. And one of the things that I certainly learned through the impeachment investigation, where, as you may recall, our witnesses were real experts on Russia, on Ukraine, Fiona Hill, George Kent, Masha Yovanovitch, people who, Bill Taylor, who really understand these issues. It was a real eye-opening experience for me to learn from them what Ukrainian sovereignty and democracy means, not only for the people of Ukraine, but for the world, the whole world's democracy. We need to do everything that we possibly can to defend democracy everywhere. And so, for me, Ukraine is the best example of how we need to do that. And so, when I was elected, I started asking my team, I said, I lived in Lower Manhattan, but I've lived on the West Side mostly. And I said, what kind of Ukrainian community do we have here? And I was excited to learn that we have such a great Ukrainian community here, and it is my honor to be here with all of you. I look forward to getting to know you today, but also in the days and months and hopefully years to come to represent you all to the best of my ability and make sure that we as the American government and the federal government are meeting your needs both here in the East Village, but also abroad. So I want to open it up to questions. It's really my honor to be here with all of you and look forward to getting to know you.
We have a bunch of people, not just who lead organizations, but I think the majority of work that I see in the audience today are people who specifically deal with, one, displaced people, and two, an enormous amount of humanitarian supply. So we can address that, or we can also talk a little bit about what's happening in DC. So I don't know where you feel comfortable first. Let's go, what these people are working on, or I know there's some specific legislative initiatives that are just beginning at the beginning of the 118th, and I can maybe start with that, so we can then go ultra local, because when you have Jason here, we're only going to be talking about local stuff from the Caucus. So first and foremost, many of us have advocated for many years going to Washington, D.C., talking to members of Congress here about the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. It was formed in 1997. Those people generally take the lead on any legislation, whether it was the Ukraine Freedom Support Act, numerous other sanctions throughout the years. We know that Congresswoman Maloney was signed up for that and visited us. What is your stance on the caucus? Because there are some people who don't sign up for caucuses. So.
I'm glad you raised that. My Deputy Chief of Staff and District Director back there, John Glasgow, is going to chide me afterwards. That was not the first thing that I said, because I have also joined the Ukraine Caucus very proudly. Co-sponsor of the 3 bills that I think you're referencing, 2 from Representative Keating and 1 from Representative Cohen, supporting both the resolution to support Ukraine broadly, but also some more other, more specific support. And I will look for, any opportunity to support our Ukrainian brothers and sisters abroad.
Great. We can talk more about DC, but obviously, as I mentioned, a lot of people here deal with primarily humanitarian aid. I do too on a regular basis, as well as helping people, displaced people. Let me see if anybody from the audience would like to bring up something about humanitarian help or displaced people to start. Ірино, чи ви працюєте, ви можете одне слово сказати за переміщенців?
Yes, hi.
Okay.
We have a huge
Sorry,
problem.
can you just introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Iryna Housing. I work as volunteer at Help Ukraine Center, and also I do real estate in Brooklyn. So for past 6 years, months, I have a huge problem. I have all the time people calling me with problems. They have no place to live. And we do not have landlords who would like to take them, since they do not have credit history, they do not have work, they have nothing. So that's the biggest problem right now.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone who can help us with that in your office, maybe in New York City?
We do. We have John here, and Agnesa is a Ukrainian. She's an intern in our office. And we have, our district is both here, but we have half of the district is in Brooklyn as well. And, I am excited also to have been appointed to the Homeland Security Committee, which will deal with many of these issues that come up, just in terms of displaced persons, in terms of, aid, and making sure that Congress does its proper oversight so that the aid gets, that the government funding gets where it needs to go. So I think the best thing for you to do is to talk to my team. We have a really good team here. And I guess you speak Ukrainian, yeah?
I speak Russian. My family all speaks Ukrainian, but we were taught Russian at home.
imagine most of them will speak
Yeah.
Russian.
So we have our database here too to collect information in case you need us to follow up on any particular issues. So Agnesa can take your information down.
I have a
for-
case right now, so I can talk to you after.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
By the way, I should mention, just in terms of you reminded me of this, Agnesa, with the Ukrainian Russian. My grandmother escaped from actually Ukraine. She and her family came over in the early 1920s to escape from the pogroms, and they lived in Ukraine. I never remember the town.
We'll get you back there. We'll get you
I would love to. I look forward to it.
Speaking of which, is that something you've done in the past before? What is your international travel experience, and with which travel agency, of which we have several here in this village, can we equip you to travel to Ukraine? Because that's a big priority. You mentioned the former president. I think at one meeting with Zelensky, said that I know Ukrainian people I've met, so I kind of get a sense of the country. Not what we believe, get on the ground best. So have you ever traveled anywhere near the area, and do you plan to travel?
I have been, well, I've actually been to Moscow, but I have not been to Ukraine. I look forward very much to going at my first opportunity. I'm navigating a new term in Congress. I have little children, so it's always a little tricky, but it's very, very high on my list, and I 100% agree with you. You cannot truly understand any country unless you go there. It is completely different if you just read about it or talk to people.
Can I ask somebody to bring up Humanitarian? Anybody wants to bring up all the work that's been done on raising humanitarian funds right now, because that's been an issue for our community, how to send it there, who to work with. Can somebody address the question? I mean, and we'll keep on talking. If you ever drive through Times Square on a weekend, you will and about 1,000 people behind them.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Arthur. I'm from Ukraine, working as a vice president in an IT company, but I'm a doctor. The question about humanitarian aid and about your attitude, it will be basically a double question if possible. Not only about humanitarian aid, but about means that would help us to win the war as well. The number of humanitarian aid that has been sent by Americans, by Ukrainians who reside in America is tremendous, it's huge. We have a lot of different organizations that supply humanitarian aid to the battlefront, to support Ukrainians, to help them. You all know about the attacks over the infrastructure, critical infrastructure. A lot of people are sitting without electricity. So the first question is, are you planning to have any work with organizations that provide humanitarian aid, and are you planning to have maybe some programs to support them? And another question, what is your view of providing more air defense systems to prevent the attacks over critical infrastructures and to prevent further deaths of civilians and help us win the war? Thank you.
I'll take the second question first. I am a very strong supporter of providing as much military aid as we can to provide everything that Ukraine needs to train Ukrainians to operate everything, whether it be tanks or missiles or fighter jets. I think we along with our allies in Europe, and I do hope that they continue to increase their support as well, so that this is a very unified effort. I thought one of perhaps the most important things that President Biden did in the first 2 years of his presidency was very quickly to rally around all of our allies, especially in Europe, to have a very unified front against Russia and in support of Ukraine. And that was especially important after the former president had destroyed so many of those relationships, and that was a real strong show of force and support that we need to continue. In terms of humanitarian aid, we are obviously well aware of all of the needs. And I think from our vantage point, we would like to be very responsive to all of you. And you are all, I assume, much more immersed with these organizations, with the community, with the needs of the people on the ground. And so, we have some ideas, but I think what we would like even more is to work closely with you all to make recommendations, because I think you will know better what is actually effective and helpful than we will from here, because you have so many friends and relatives who I'm sure are speaking to. So I hope we can begin this dialogue and that we get recommendations from all of you as to which organizations are doing the excellent work and how can we try to figure out ways to both support the organizations but support the effort as well. And then, I will going to continue to work in Congress, especially through my committee, to push for as much humanitarian aid in addition to the military aid. And I think too often, people look at the aid just purely from the defense and military side, and as you point out, with the attacks on the infrastructure, there are just unending amount of needs in terms of very basic supplies and heating, etc. in the wintertime. So I hope we can learn from you on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just quickly, I believe Samantha Murray said that half of what was allocated for USAID was actually distributed in Ukraine, so you'll probably get that question throughout the year, because on the one side, yes, we're going to be chanting outside, more weapons, more attack guns, more everything. On the other side, we have allocated the money, and who's actually getting the money is, yeah.
And that's something else that I think is very important for Congress to do, which is to be providing that oversight. We can, and we have, Congress has appropriated the money, but it has to be implemented, it has to be executed, and it has to be distributed. And this is not something that we should be waiting on.
I think you'll get a big response from our community that, especially all the ones that meet every week online, in terms of how we advocate. We welcome, there are people obviously in Congress who have come into Congress saying that they want to investigate where this money is going, etc. We welcome that. We're always ready to count every nickel. I think if you look at multiple websites, and we'll share them, Facebook, you'll get somebody will buy a drone, not a military drone, but somebody will buy a drone for a community, somebody will buy equipment for a community, and you will get pictures where that is received, who's wearing that on a regular basis. So we are absolutely, as a community, I can say probably that we are all united in terms of we would welcome those people who are saying that we should have investigations, but we want to include the entire list. Let's just not talk about missiles. Let's talk about everything. If you've promised aid, where is that going? So we're willing to help you in any way in terms of that respect. Okay, so we did trochę humanitarian pytanie.
Hello, my name is Ian Edwards. I'm an American journalist. I just have a few questions about military aid to Ukraine. You just said that you are...
Sorry, hold on, Ian. Are we doing this off the record? I believe this is just for the community, so...
it's off the record.
Yeah, it's informal, not the press. I know there's lots of people who want to do press questions, so that can be handled after the fact. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'll wait till after.
just want to be very, very clear on that, because we do have members of our community. Pani Iryna, czy wy mogli pytanie takie z sprawy? I'm going to introduce you to not only the former head of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, which you have in your district, but the World Federation of Women's Organizations, and also the former head of the International Council of Women. So,
and I also was the president of National Council of Women, which was the largest women's organization in the United States.
Wow.
So I'm very well aware of what's going on, but I would like to see already our president is talking about giving money. And I think it should be already said because Ukrainians are dying. They're dying of hunger, they're dying of the bombardment, they're dying of cold, of everything possible. When we had the Second World War, when I was reading later in my life, I have to say everybody chipped in, everybody wanted to get rid of the Nazis. But Nazis and communists did the same thing, it's only by a different name. So we have to take a look and analyze and take a look and put our foot down. We are the biggest country that can help, not only by donating, but also by doing the right thing. Because it's time to do it. We can't wait any longer. Because if everybody leaves Ukraine, what is it going to do? What I heard last, that Putin said, when we ruin Ukraine, we'll go to Poland. And he will not stop on any country because he wants to be Tsar of Europe. So, and later on maybe of the world because he's a nut. And we have to take a look at him and analyze and start thinking of our own world. Because between China and Russia, and what is going on with those balloons and everything else, it's a dangerous situation. So let's look all around the world, not only at one thing.
And let me just preface also that Iryna will be one of the lead people when the Committee on Women's Studies at the UN will be bringing a delegation from Ukraine specifically on what's happening. This is why it's a very personal issue to us, the war crimes that are happening.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. One of the bills that I'm co-sponsoring is addressing war crimes and needing to make sure that there is some process to investigate and potentially prosecute for war crimes. One of the other bills is to designate one of the Russian mercenary groups as a foreign terrorist organization. And so those are additional actions that I think we in the United States need to be leading the international community on to make sure that we're not just providing money. We are providing lots of military aid, and that's not just money. That is actual weapons and various military supplies, etc. But we also need to make sure that we are going to hold those accountable who have been committing the atrocities in Ukraine. I do think, though, that it is a difficult question as to when the United States itself should engage in military action, and I think we are not at that point. And partly it's because Ukraine has done such a good job of defending its country with the support of the international community, but we have to make sure that we are continuing that support and that we're constantly ahead of the game. We cannot fall back where we're chasing what is going on.
Ми ще мали різні питання. Артуре?
Speaking about the terrorist organization, there was, and there is, I assume, a bill in Senate that recognizes Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. We know there is a number of countries that the United States recognized as state sponsors of terrorism, and talking about all the war crimes that Russian troops committed in Ukraine, talking about modern day genocide, talking about kidnappings. The latest article said that over 6,000 kids were kidnapped and right now in Russia in training camps. What is your attitude towards recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism?
I think that the more that we are learning along the lines of what you are saying, and just reading about the atrocities of these mass graves, of the killing of innocent victims, of trying to cut off the the lifeline of supplies, etc. We are going further and further down that road where we are looking at an intentional genocide. We are looking at what is effectively international terrorism. And so we certainly in Congress are very aware of that. And I think there's been a very strong push to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. The Biden administration has thus far resisted it, and I suspect, although I don't have any firsthand information, that part of this is trying to keep the option of a negotiated peace settlement alive. And there is an argument to be made that if we do start designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, that there are so many things that then flow from that it will make it much more difficult to resolve this through a peace settlement, and it may end up prolonging the war. So that's the calculus, which is difficult because I think what they are doing is absolutely unacceptable under war crimes, international war crimes law, under prohibitions against genocide. But we also want to make sure that we are able to resolve this sooner rather than later.
Будь ласка, sorry. Після вас.
Hi, my name is Cyril. I'm a public activist. Here in US, I'm a member of foundation which specializes in humanitarian aid for Ukraine. It's a Ukraine Foundation. And I am founder of Foundation Ukraine since 2014, which specializes in military support and support our defenders, as I also was involved in 2014 and 15 in this beginning of the war. So we know what's needed for our defenders, and I very appreciate what you said about the military support for us, because it is the most important for us now. So, but also here I trying to help protests which are organizing, and we see the bigger support of US society, of Ukraine, but we're facing with some cases when the people asking why we're sending this money, and we worry about our money, we want them to stay here. And that's why we're a little concerned about this work from your side. As from our Ukrainian side, we want military flow goes on and only increase it. And we know then when US set up some budget like 3 billion or something, it's mostly military help, military support, so it's increase of manufacturing, increase some economy, some areas connected with areas. So mostly this money stay in US, and it helps grow its economy. It helps to have more orders and future and stuff like this. Do you plan some work with this category of people who don't like this help in Ukraine, who say they're concerned? So what is your attitude to this problem? Thank you.
Sorry, so specifically which problem?
Specifically that we're facing that some people asking why we help in Ukraine when we have problems here in US. So,
well, that's where I personally always go back to promoting democracy, which we need to do here. We have problems here right now with democracy, but we need to be promoting democracy all around the world. The reason why the United States is a beacon of democracy and has an influence around the world is partially because we set our own example of it, and that's why what I personally think that President Trump did, and has done is so dangerous. But we need to be supporting democracy all around the world, because that is what is ultimately going to make the world a safer place. That is what is ultimately going to create economic opportunity opportunities for everyone around the world, that is what's going to stabilize the world. And so, yes, there's a lot to do here, but there's also a lot to do there. And it doesn't have to be either or.
Thank you for your.
I'll also point out that as my father came over, as my grandfather and my great-grandfather came over, we are also Americans here. So it is a valid perspective of some of the populace here that we want to help Ukraine, not just because of ideals, but we have our own constituent issues with. When people say on the television that why are we spending this American money, this is all of our money. So we are on the table. And for some of the issues, as was mentioned, I want to just briefly state that we do come up to Washington on a regular basis. I know there's one scheduled time in March. We also have an additional time in April coming up where our community likes to get on buses. And so we'll get to meet your Washington staff at some point who's watching through Zoom today. And so people who have been on the front line generally come with us. And also I would like to point out that, and I'm not harping on this, but one of the things that Congresswoman Maloney was able to do when the war started was actually get private briefings where we could have people Zoom in. So if we could work with our office, if your office wants to work with anybody in our community, we're welcome to give you witnesses.
Great. I will say on that note, we brought over a senior staff member from Congresswoman Maloney's district office who has been very focused on a lot of the displaced persons issues. Okay. And so is really very knowledgeable about how to help with that. And so we have that expertise in our office as well.
Hi, my name is Christopher Atwood. I represent Razom, which is actually just upstairs from here. So if you or your staff want to see our little office afterwards, we're more than happy to give you a small tour. So I work in advocacy initiatives with Razom, so I very much appreciate that you've proactively worked to sift through legislation that you can get behind. So you mentioned, the legislation you mentioned about foreign terrorist organizations is called the HARM Act. I know because I'm spearheading that from our end. So it designates the flag foreign terrorist organization. Also, I do know that last year there were the two resolutions in the House and Senate on recognizing the full-scale invasion as genocide. I actually was one of the authors of a major legal analysis that determined that Russia was in violation of the Genocide Convention last year, which is what prompted me to be so involved in advocacy right now.
Terrific.
So I just want to say, well, a couple of things. Number one is in terms of the state sponsor of terrorism, we do hear that a lot about the concern about being able to negotiate afterwards, although I do want to stress, especially to the community here, that state sponsor of terrorism is a very modular tool that we can use, and it does not prevent us from creating diplomatic avenues to negotiate with other people. That's how the Iran deal was negotiated, despite Iran being a state sponsor of terrorism. That's right. But I also do want to say from our end, especially with your position as a representative of this district where you have these very strong Ukrainian organizations that have very deep roots in the city, you represent a very strong Ukrainian community. I want to stress your role as a champion of these causes, not just as a co-sponsor, but the fact that you have a very unique position where you can champion these things. And so I just am curious how you're planning to proceed. I commend you for already preemptively doing a lot of that right now. And I would also suggest that you and your staff take a look at, from the last Congress, there was a bill called the Major Democratic Ally. I think that was what it's called. It creates this legal concept of the Major Democratic Ally, which designates Ukraine as an ally of the United States and a country in Europe that is literally what it says, another country that is dedicated to democracy and dedicated to the same values as the United States.
Yep. All very valid points and very much appreciated. I've been in office for about 6 weeks. So I'm trying to get up to speed on a lot of issues, but including this one because, and not just including, but especially this one, because it is, you know, it is, yes, I think it's important for the strong Ukrainian community that is in my district, but it also has the benefit of just being the right thing to do. And I think that as, you know, as someone, Andre mentioned this, who has not previously been in politics, you know, I am coming into this truly with a desire to do public service, to be an effective member of Congress, to represent not only my district, but this city, this state, and this country, and ultimately to do the right thing. And so this falls directly in that category. I will be honest with you that I am not an expert on, you know, a lot of these issues. Obviously, I have a legal background and I broadly understand genocide. I broadly understand, you know, some of the UN conventions, et cetera. But I need to get up to speed a little bit more. But I can assure you that this is a very important issue to me, and it is something that I will be focusing on.
Hello, my name is Eugenia. I'm here with Help Ukraine Center USA today. I want to thank you for this meeting and for the opportunity to ask and discuss very important questions. As a person who recently came to the US from Ukraine, as a volunteer now, I meet a lot of Ukrainians who come with great experience, education, and my question is there going to be some vision of developing understandable programs of professional transmitting into the local environment? Because there are a lot of initiatives of finding survival jobs. You can be a cleaning lady, you can be a waitress, you can be a driver, you can be a home attendant. But what about people who came with a science degree, medical sphere, media sphere, maybe some internship programs or something like that? Because even when you send your resume and you answer questions, they ask you, please indicate your gender, indicate your race, indicate are you a protected veteran or not. But Ukrainians are definitely not prioritized now, so maybe there is some chance. Thank you.
You raise a very good point, which is, and I think this is my broad view on our immigration system, which is that we need to be providing more visas, more lawful work authorization permits, especially to people, or especially to match up people with their advanced degrees and the jobs that are available. It's an incredibly important part of it, and we should be, and this is something that on the Homeland Security Committee I want to look into. I would like to figure out a way there is temporary protected status for some countries, especially, you know, South America in particular, but we ought to be looking into whether that's some option for displaced persons from Ukraine who are coming over here, or refugees from Afghanistan. You know, there are other areas in the world where that we should be welcoming people with open arms, but it doesn't just mean that they come here and just to live and to survive as best they can. It should mean that we welcome them into our economy using expertise that people have developed before. And so that, I think, is something that we really will need to look at, and it's something I'm going to focus on with my committee, the Homeland Security Committee, which oversees the immigration system.
Before I think that people might want to, you know, ask the congressman directly to, you know, stop by their church and stuff. So if there's any more questions for the broad audience, I'll take this time to do a final check. I will mention that the visa issue is something that our community has been doing for a long time. We're more than happy to be involved in it. This will be the 75th anniversary of the Displaced Persons Act, which is why my father came over here. A lot of other people's parents came over here and built this East Village. But last year, one of the things that was brought up when we were talking about inviting people to this meeting was that last year there was an initiative on Congress called the Grandparents Visa, which was something to help people who, there's a certain age that you can't leave Ukraine because of the service, but over a certain age you can leave, but then the issue is getting the visa. So maybe having grandparents come to help with the family over here, if that's something that can be done. I just want to point that out. We'll send that draft legislation over to you as well. So.
I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Teraz pytanie, czy my tільки будемо просити його до церкви? Anybody else want to do a broad question, or else we're going to invite him to every single potluck dinner from now until Easter? Okay, ваші оплески. I know there's a lot of representatives that would love to, invite you to come visit the parish on a weekend when the population changes from 300 to 5,000. So,
Great. I would love that.
Artur, прошу. We have something that was signed last year. And we never got it to Congress.
Yeah, we never got it into Congress, and it is our honor to give this to you. You know about the event of Holodomor in Ukraine, the genocide.
Yes.
And that genocide was never recognized as a genocide in the United States, although the Ukrainian community tried very hard. And these are just, I guess, maybe 1%.
So in your district, we have a commemoration that begins from our church and goes up to St. Patrick's Cathedral. We've been doing this for 25 years. And this year, at St. Patrick's, we had this outside, our crew was standing, and just everyday citizens or people coming to recognize it, we're signing it. And we've never gotten to Congress since then. So that was just every November, and we'll put that on the calendar for next year. But so you know, these are all people who just are interested in that recognition, which
is that November 18th?
November 18th, yeah.
Great.
He already has it on this calendar.
Got it. Yeah, this is great. We'll take this down. And, would love to. We'll try to figure out a way to introduce this on the floor.
Oh wow.
We can do a 1-minute speech just to identify this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Artur, for even thinking about that.
Thank you.
Jak ktoś ma je Jak ktoś mає записатися до офісу, вона має готові реєструвати вас. Як хтось хоче реєструвати до офісу, вона готові записати всіх. Як ви хочете мати контакти з нею, то вона має сіла та пішки. Мати контакти з вами на допомогу. Так, запишіться з нею. Будь ласка.
На що треба записатися?
Ти радник, вона запишує ім'я, і хтось хоче бути в контакті з нею. Вона буде головна контакт з громадою, а є ще інші, які буде займатися справами біженцями і інше. Але вона буде головна контакт. Так, вона вже збирає всіх інформацію, так, щоб ми